we should do?
We will convert him, teach him to be a sensible toad, save the unfortunate animal from itself. He'll be the most converted toad there ever was, by the time I finish with him.
Hello there, Richard the Film Geek here, and I'm here to give you guys my special Easter 2025 review of the 2006 TV movie adaptation of the 1908 Kenneth Grahame children's classic, The Wind in the Willows, which was originally broadcast here in the UK on BBC One as part of the Christmas schedules on New Year's Day 2007, was written by Lee Hall, who at the time was previously Oscar nominated for his screenplay to Billy Elliot, before later going on to do War Horse and Rocket Man, was directed by the one and only Rachel Talalay, who would of course later go on to helm several episodes of Sherlock and chiefly Doctor Who, and features an all-star British ensemble cast consisting of Matt Lucas, who was on a roll at the time with Little Britain, Bob Hoskins, Mark Gatiss, Lee Ingleby, Michael Murphy, aided, believe it or not, by the iconically booming voice of Fourth Doctor actor Tom Baker, Anna Maxwell Martin, Jim Carter, and pre-Dolores Umbridge, Imelda Staunton. For the sake of informing those who have somehow never read the book and or seen any of the various film, TV and stage adaptations over the years, i.e. the 1949 Disney animated short that's actually the first half of The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad, the 1996 live-action Monty Python version, the 1987 hand-drawn animated Rankin Bass version, and or especially the Cosgrove Hall version and subsequent television series from the early 80s, and are thus somehow still unfamiliar with what is one of the most popular and best known British children's stories ever written. The story of The Wind in the Willows takes place in early 20th century Edwardian England. So in other words, roughly around the exact particular time Kenneth Grahame wrote the book. And we basically follow the adventures and or misadventures of easily one of, if not the most beloved and iconic quartet of anthropomorphic animal characters in British children's literature, namely the curious mole, the skeptical and worldly wise Ratty, the curmudgeon with a heart of gold Badger, and the larger-than-life, fad-crazy, eccentric, and honestly my personal favourite of the four, Mr. Toad. As Toad develops a dangerously OTT obsession with motor cars that both lands him in all sorts of trouble with the law and leads to his estate of Toad Hall being overrun in his absence by Badger's dodgy neighbours within the Wild Wood, i.e. the Weasels, is up to Mole, Ratty and Badger to try and knock some common sense into their friend, make him realise the error of his ways, and ultimately save him both from prison and from himself. So now that I've recently rewatched this adaptation for the first time, really since my teenage years, here are my thoughts on The Wind in the Willows 2006. While of course this is not the adaptation that immediately comes to mind and or is necessarily part of the conversation when it comes to some of the best known adaptations of this timeless classic story, this is still such a damn fun adaptation. I must honestly be the first and or the only person to talk about this version here on YouTube, because rather shockingly enough, not a lot of people talk about this version that much, which kind of makes this one of the more shamefully underrated adaptations, in my opinion. Is it perfect? No, not entirely. Is it more faithful to the book? Surprisingly, yes, especially with the full inclusion of the Piper at the Gates of Dawn chapter, which otherwise no other version had dared to include up to that point. And yet I'll go on the record to say that that whole sequence is so beautifully well handled and crafted in this version. From Rachel Talele's direction, to the visuals, to the acting from Lee Ingleby and Mark Gatiss, to even the score, it just feels like something out of Peter Jackson's The Lord of the Rings. When it comes to the performances, everyone for the most part does a rock solid job here. From the main four all the way down to even the wonderful supporting performances and or extended cameos from the likes of Anna Maxwell Martin as the jailer's daughter, Imelda Staunton clearly having a ball with her 2 or 3 minutes of screen time as the barge lady, Mr. Carson from Downton Abbey himself, Jim Carter as the train driver, Michael Murphy and or Tom Baker as the judge, and even a nicely hilarious bit part from Canadian comic Mary Walsh as the washerwoman. Lee Ingleby is so suitably sweet, likeable, endearing and relatable as Mole that you just want to give him a nice big hug, and he actually surprisingly provides the emotional core of the film. Mark Gatiss is fine as Ratty. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's not necessarily a bad casting choice for this role per se, but of the main four, his is the performance I frankly have to single out as the weakest, and I honestly don't know why. It's almost as if he's trying a bit too hard to overact or ham up this performance. And honestly, if I was the casting director, I would have picked someone much better suited to the role, like, I don't know, David Tennant. But really, it's these last two performances I want to talk about that are easily the true standout highlights of this movie. Starting off with Matt Lucas as Toad. While I do understand why some people would be turned off and a bit annoyed by this performance, since in a way this is Lucas basically regurgitating some of the same shtick he used in Little Britain, in my honest opinion, it actually kind of works here. In fact, call me crazy for thinking this, but very similarly, for example, to Will Smith's surprisingly unique take on the genie in the 2019 live-action Aladdin remake, I'd probably go as far to say that Matt Lucas is strangely perfect for this role and just perfectly nails the essence of Toad's character from the book. The way he chews up the scenery and carries himself, his line delivery, his facial expressions, the vocal inflections in his voice, his natural comedic timing, the way he sings Toad's musical passages from the book, kind of eerily similarly to the way Terry Jones sings them in the 96 version, actually. Even the gut-bustingly funny comic insults he casually dishes out to Mole, and particularly Ratty at the beginning. You can just tell through this performance how much of a true blast Matt probably had behind the scenes, and how much he probably wanted to do this iconic character true justice, whilst at the same time bringing his own unique and fresh spin on the character. Just such a brilliantly fun, delightfully childish and camp, and hilarious performance from Matt Lucas here. Just absolutely loved his characterization of Toad. Speaking of brilliantly fun, I'm actually so goddamn happy that I saved this particular performance to talk about last, because while admittedly Badger is probably my second favourite character in the book, generally besides Toad obviously, the performance Bob Hoskins gives here as this character is indescribably incredible, to say the least, and thus easily my favourite performance of the bunch in this movie. Holy shit, does he completely transform and disappear into this role. The first time you see him on screen, his posture, the way he contorts his face into almost this badger-like growl, the cynically dry humour that perfectly contrasts with the more out there and bombastic humour of Matt Lucas's Toad, the wig and minimal prosthetics they put on him to suitably accentuate his animal-like features, even the freaking voice.
Go away! Go away! Ratty! Why didn't you say it was you? Come inside, bring your friend. He'll be the most converted Toad there ever was by the time I'm finished with him.
There is so much presence, so much understated nuance, and so much gravitas to Bob Hoskins's performance that he single-handedly dominates every single scene he is in. Not to mention that this probably rivals his Eddie Valiant in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, or Smee in Hook and or Neverland, the miniseries, as the most fun I've seen Bob Hoskins have with any of the great performances he gave throughout his legendary career. And honestly, what more do I really need to say other than R.I.P. Bob Hoskins, and thank you for gifting us with such an underrated yet still amazing performance here, and truly reminding us how much we loved you and really still miss you to this day. Especially if you're someone who's watched some of the episodes of Sherlock and Doctor Who she's done since making this movie. Of course you're going to expect Rachel Talalay to do such a fantastic job with her direction here, and as it turns out, to the surprise of literally no one, not even to the person talking to you right now, that's exactly what she does. Also, from a technical perspective, the film looks visually pleasing and lovely to look at. Even though I will politely concede that obviously some of the CGI doesn't really hold up as well today. But then again, of course this wasn't going to be anywhere near as impressive as, say, Lord of the Rings or Narnia, especially due to the nature of this being a more low-budget television production. Plus, while I would absolutely love to have seen these characters be CGI'd or had rubber masks put on the actors' faces, sort of akin to the Lion King stage production, as was the original intention apparently, I actually kind of understand and appreciate why the filmmakers ultimately decided to play it safe and instead opt for the more practical and or minimal use of prosthetics and makeup to make these actors look more animalistic. Because if Willem Dafoe's ditching of the Green Goblin mask in Spider-Man No Way Home, for example, taught us anything, it's that the practice of putting a mask on the actor's face doesn't conceptually always have to be a bad thing, but it works 10 times better to just allow the actor to freely express their performance. Now, for all the praise I'm giving this film, as I briefly stated earlier in the video, it's not entirely a perfect adaptation, in my opinion. In other words, there are only just maybe 3 issues I have with the film that hold it back from being a masterpiece for me. The first issue is with the pacing, particularly during the extended winter scenes with Mole and Ratty as they help celebrate Christmas with some young mice. While on the one hand I superficially understand the message and the purpose of their inclusion, especially since this movie aired as part of the Christmas schedules at the time after all, on the other hand they end up grinding the pacing to a halt for a bit, and that's kind of a shame, especially for a story that's supposed to be as fast-paced and energetic as its amphibian central character. The second issue I have is with the incidental score, which sounds kind of off at times and doesn't always exactly gel as well with the more whimsical, light-hearted, childlike and playful tone of the story. But by far the third, final, and frankly biggest issue I have with this particular adaptation is with the rather underwhelming underutilization of the weasels. Here's what I mean by this. Firstly, in this version, unlike previous versions of this story, we're never actually shown how and or why the weasels managed to take over Toad Hall, and instead, towards the end, we're somehow only told that it happened. I'm really not the biggest fan of this change from the source material. A, because it doesn't really make sense, and B, because it consequently makes the mistake of diminishing the true serious threat and menace towards our main four protagonists that the weasels are supposed to pose. Which incidentally was surprisingly what the 96 version, for all its obvious faults, managed to handle really well. And even what the 1949 Disney short handled so excellently, not just with the addition of Mr. Winky as the human substitute for the Chief Weasel, but with the clever and rather ingenious twist as well that the weasels were the ones who stole the motor car, only duped Toad into signing Toad Hall over to them via the deed papers in the tavern, and effectively framed him on the spot for the crime. It's almost as if Lee Hall completely forgot to develop the weasels as proper characters and focused way too much on developing the other characters, particularly Toad, that the weasels end up being treated in this version as more like an afterthought than a plot device within the story. Secondly, it doesn't help that their costumes and makeup looks kind of ridiculous. If anything, they look more like demented medieval Cirque du Soleil performers than an actual threat. Thirdly, as a result, the climactic Toad Hall battle in this version kind of feels underwhelming, devoid of any actual stakes, suspense or tension, anticlimactic, and rather rushed. In conclusion, even despite its imperfections holding it back from being a true masterpiece, The Wind in the Willows 2006 still remains, in my opinion, to be a real damn fun and watchable adaptation of this classic story nearly 20 years later. Oh.
20 years?
Yes, Toad, I know, right? It effortlessly takes advantage of its televisual limitations and manages to retain a majority of the spirit, the essence, the charm, the humour, and above all, the core message of the book. Matt Lucas and especially Bob Hoskins absolutely kill it in the acting department with their respective individual performances as Toad and Badger, and are by far the biggest reason why this adaptation works so well, more than it otherwise had any right to. Even if you're someone who fondly remembers reading the book during your childhood as much as I do, and or thus want to see a more faithful and book-accurate adaptation of this story, even despite a few reservations, I'd still very much highly recommend that you give this version a watch. And with all that being said, my overall rating for The Wind in the Willows 2006 is going to be a very solid 7.5 out of 10. Don't forget to do the following few things as always. Leave a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on The Wind in the Willows 2006. Subscribe to my channel. Click on the little bell to receive any emailed notifications and or updates from my channel. If you haven't already, you can also follow me on Facebook, Instagram, Letterboxd and Blue Sky. Do take care, everyone. Hope you guys have a very happy Easter 2025 and poo-poo!
Ratty! Why didn't you say it was you? Come inside, bring your friend.